dominated by the escalating conflict in Iran, where a U.S. airman who went missing when an F 15E fighter jet was shot down over a remote area on Friday was actually rescued overnight local time, according to a statement from President Trump and multiple other U.S. officials who have been confirming it. The pilot of the two-person aircraft had previously been rescued as well, so both U.S. servicemen are safe. Though it's worth noting that President Trump hasn't made a public appearance since Wednesday. That's 4 days ago. Though he is expected to appear at an Easter event at the White House later today with First Lady Melania Trump, so watch that space. As always, when President Trump doesn't appear in public for a few days, people begin to speculate about his health and well being, so we'll see if he turns up at the Easter egg event at the White House later today. Mr. Trump on Saturday, warned again through a statement that the time is running out and that Iran has 48 hours to reopen the Strait of Hormuz before the U.S. will unleash, quote, hell. He's made this threat before. It's a threat that he continues to kind of fall back on as the U.S. continues to fall into a conflict that has no real resolution, no real objectives, no real timelines. He threatens Iran with a 48-hour sort of ultimatum to open the Strait of Hormuz. And then Iran trolls him with Twitter accounts, with social media accounts run by their embassies around the world, as a means to reject these ultimatums. So President Trump gives him 48 hours. The Iranians troll him on social media, and then the world laughs at Trump, and then he fires bombs, and then he issues another ultimatum, and that seems to be the cycle we're in. So watch this space. It's not getting any prettier. Oh, this is interesting. So the niece and grandniece of slain Iranian Revolutionary Guard General Qasem Soleimani were arrested in the U.S. after their lawful permanent resident status was terminated. They were living in Los Angeles. A lot of people think that this was a retaliation for a possible hostage situation with the U.S. servicemen who were shot down over Iran in the F-15E fighter. So the theory is that, ICE picked up Qasem Soleimani's grandchildren. Qasem Soleimani obviously was a big hero of Iran. A lot of people really looked up to him. He was kind of a war hero for them, and he was killed by a U.S. and Israeli strike in the first Trump administration. So they're targeting his kids as a way of, getting them in custody in case they needed to trade them for U.S. fighter pilots. A lot of people think that that was kind of the underlying motivation for targeting these otherwise total randos who are living in Los Angeles with immigration issues. This is a sobering number. A total of 365 American service members have been injured as part of the U.S. operations against Iran, according to the Pentagon's own figures. That's 365 American service members in a month who have been injured. And it's only going to get higher as we continue to bungle our way through this war. Okay, so we've got an update on the White House ballroom. The administration has fired an emergency motion to continue the $400 million construction of a fortified White House ballroom. A federal judge recently ordered a pause to the project, citing a lack of congressional approval for the demolition of parts of the East Wing. This is the back and forth that we're in right now with Trump and the courts. Basically, he says, I live in the White House, so I can do whatever I want here. And the courts are telling him, well, it's not your White House. It's the people's White House. You can't just tear shit down and put shit up. So watch this space as well, because I think that ultimately this is kind of one of those battles that Trump is going to run up against the clock. His term is only 4 years. I know that there's sort of a paranoia that he's going to want to stay longer. But if the parties change hands and if the White House changes parties while the ballroom is still under construction, I would imagine that it's going to be torn down. And his great monument to himself, the Trump ballroom, will be nothing. It'll be another incomplete, unkept promise by Trump from his presidency. But if he does finish it, that would be a much more interesting scenario, because then it'll be up to a future Democratic president to determine whether or not to tear it down, right? But either way, if he does finish it and he does name it the Trump Ballroom, you can expect that the next administration, assuming it's a Democratic administration, is going to, at the very least, rename it, because At this point, it's getting kind of ridiculous. Trump is, I think, a 33% approval rating across, nationwide amongst voters, which is historically low. It's never been the case for any president. So, and again, like the war in Iran, it's not going to get any better for Trump as prices go up. And his own voters begin to turn their back on him as they have been. Okay, so there's an education ruling. A judge has halted an administration effort that would have required colleges to prove that they're not considering race in admissions, a significant blow to the White House's recent higher education directives. That's really interesting. Obviously, Trump has done everything he can to get away with DEI, including affirmative action and so on. So the courts are starting to make them pump the brakes on some of those white supremacist and anti-diversity initiatives. Defense spending. So the White House this is fucking crazy. The White House is seeking a historic $1.5 trillion defense budget for fiscal year 2027. That's a 42% increase over what we spend on the Pentagon every year, what Congress does, which is already easily like the biggest expense we have. We spend insane amounts. We spend more money on defense than the next dozen or so countries combined who's in spending beneath us on that chart. So a 42% increase would be insane. It's like we're trying to spend more money than the rest of the world collectively, specifically on defense, in a moment when we have a Fox News host, Pete Hegseth, running the Department of Defense, which he has decided to start calling the Department of War, though it was never officially renamed the Department of War. So I'm going to keep calling it the Department of Defense. But yeah, Trump wants to give Pete Hegseth $1.5 trillion. The Americans all saw what happened when he gave Kristi Noem $175 billion for mass deportations when he signed the One Big Beautiful Bill Act last July 4th. It's a total disaster. She was completely out of her depth, and she made America less safe. I think that, if successful with a $1.5 trillion defense budget, Pete Hegseth would make the entire world less safe, or even more less safe than he already is with his misadventures on the taxpayer dime and with American blood and treasure in Iran. So 1.5 trillion, I don't think the Senate's going to go for that. I don't think the House is going to go for that either. That is one where that's a price tag where they're going to run into not only issues with every Democrat, because the war is basically universally unpopular among Democratic voters, but also a lot of Republicans. There are the occasional Republicans still who are legitimate fiscal hawks who actually care about spending and getting spending down and care about actual waste, fraud, and abuse, not the bullshit that MAGA influencers gin up in places like Minneapolis to call waste, fraud, and abuse. What happens at the Pentagon is actual waste, fraud, and abuse at a unprecedented, historic scale. A fun fact about the Pentagon, if you want to call it that, is that it's never actually been audited. Like, the Pentagon has not been audited. Their expenses do not get audited because it's just such a vast bureaucracy that it's deemed unauditable. So we just don't do it. So the Pentagon wants $1.5 trillion. They also don't want to be audited, or they might say they want to be audited and they just aren't audited. They've never been audited. So ridiculous. I don't see Congress going for it, but maybe we will find out when they get back in, not next week, but the following Monday. I think it's April 13th, but you have to fact check that. Don't quote me on that. Okay, so the U.S. has begun revoking the green cards and visas of several Iranian nationals with ties to the Iranian government. Like we said, Soleimani's family and others. The cruelty of USCIS and the Department of Homeland Security's immigration capacity continues to get worse, even as the overt killings of American citizens on the streets of American suburbs seems to have waned since the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy in January. So it's not getting, mass deportations continue. And the bureaucratic choke points for stopping migrants from coming here or punishing migrants who are already here continue to be exacerbated by Stephen Miller and his team of xenophobes in the West Wing and the agency. As of now, Stephen Miller his position in the White House seems to have stabilized from when, Trump allegedly yelled at him over the incredible unpopularity and sort of the rank toxicity of his actions in Minneapolis and some of the impacts that it was having on his public opinion polling. Kristi Noem was basically thrown under the bus for all of that. But before she basically said that everything that she had done as DHS secretary, she had done on Donald Trump's behest, on the behest of Donald Trump and Stephen Miller. And I think, in my opinion, it wasn't the $220 million ad campaign that Trump fired her over that she gave to her press secretary's husband. It's total grift, and a big grift, the kind of grift that I could totally see Trump getting jealous of because he didn't get a taste of it himself or whatever. But no, I don't think that's why she was fired. I would think she was fired because she said that Stephen Miller was the one who told her to say things and do things like claim that Alex Preddy and Renee Good were domestic terrorists. And Stephen Miller saw the writing on the wall. He was just like, well, this is clearly somebody I can't work with because she's somebody who wants to throw me under the bus. Stephen Miller allegedly only uses signal chats, disappearing signal chats, or other encrypted messaging to coordinate these mass deportation orders outward, so that there won't be any evidence later for prosecutors to come after him. So for Kristi Noem to say, what was Stephen who told me that, to say that Alex Preddy was a domestic terrorist, that was probably pretty alarming to him. And I could totally see a situation where he worked with Senator Kennedy and other Republican senators who helped throw, and other Republican lawmakers generally who helped throw Kristi Noem under the bus in Congress. Corey Lewandowski and Stephen, they've worked together before, but I don't know that they were ever particularly close. But it is reported that Stephen Miller was appalled by the infidelity going on between Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski. Apparently, to Stephen Miller, monogamy is a really important thing. Anyway, long story short, Miller, that's why, and Rubio is why we're revoking green cards and visas of Iranian nationals with ties to the Tehran government. They definitely have the ability to do it, and they've been doing it previously to other groups. Iranians are now being targeted specifically and politically, so watch this space. That's going to continue to get worse before it gets better. Okay, so in space, NASA has released the first images of Earth taken by Artemis 2 astronauts as they transit toward the moon. That's pretty dope. If I was making this video for YouTube, I would definitely flash those photos on the screen. But yeah, give it a look-see. I will add the link in the description of this video for the 5 people who are receiving it. Hopefully you watch it, and at this point in the video, you're like, dude, he's talking way too long. It's been 12 minutes. Well, I'm not done yet because I'm reading from a script that I created beforehand of bullet points, and I'm going to learn to present them better. This is, like I said, to the people who are receiving this in the email, kind of a beta test of a video platform, a daily video platform, a daily video update. So this one doesn't have to be great. Not a lot of people are going to see it. You're seeing it. And if you want to comment in the comments, or if you want to text me and tell me this sucks, talk less, please do. At least then I'll know you watched it and you were engaged, and I'll feel really good about that, because hopefully, I don't want to make a big video product nobody watches, but I think I could definitely talk into a can every day pretty reliably. Okay, last bullet point. Employers, this is the one sort of good news for America and a positive outcome for the White House and the Trump administration. Employers added 178,000 jobs last month, showing a rebound in the labor market despite geopolitical instability. I haven't looked deeply into these numbers. I probably should. And, if I were doing morning updates when I had a little bit more formulaically, this is the number that I would like to, I wonder what the 178,000 jobs are, but I don't have that information in front of me. If I had millions of people watching this, I would say, chat, let me know. Do you trust these numbers, or what are these numbers? Where are these jobs going to? Something like that. And hopefully people would reply. And that would be fun, because then I wouldn't be talking to myself at 4:14 a.m. on Easter Sunday, making a beta version of a morning update for my most constructive critics, which I hope you will be. Anyway, thank you so much for being a beta tester in this Pablo Reports video. The script below is just cut and pasted very lazily, haphazardly from Gemini, but the idea is to kind of go through the workflow and keep doing the process and improve it a little bit for maybe a week or two, or maybe just a week before launching it properly when Congress gets back on April 13th and having a AM and PM update where I just talk it to the can and concisely without rambling and so on, and maybe develop an audience. We shall see. We shall see. Okay. Happy Easter. Peace out. Please Please like and subscribe and stay safe out there, fam. And